There's a lot to say about Evolve, from the original pricing model and record-breaking 42 available DLC at launch, and yeah, that's the actual number, to the unique asymmetric mechanics and even the transition to free-to-play. What I want to try and understand is, why did people leave the game after the successful launch? Evolve actually sold very well. 2.5 million copies were purchased between the February launch and May 2015, but the game lost almost all of its player base in the months following. There are undoubtedly many reasons, and you could read some in the game's mixed reviews, but trying to get some of my own friends to play, I've come to believe Evolve failed to keep a player base because it actually has unique, nuanced gameplay while it masquerades as a standard FPS and never bothers to teach that to players. Let's take a look at the changes made to the game for the free-to-play re-release. The biggest difference is that the game has become faster and more action-oriented. Previously, matches could be 20 and even 30 minutes long as the hunters try to find the monster and could occasionally get totally lost. There was this feeling of hunter and hunted that brought about an exhilarating urgency. You gotta find the monster quickly before she gets stronger, and as the monster you have to get away or you're screwed. That type of hunting stealth metagame is very different from standard FPS, and so didn't sit well with most players looking for that action-oriented gameplay. Now, after the changes, the hunters have a much simpler time finding the monster, and in turn, the monster is much stronger in the early game so it can actually fight. Matches don't typically pass the 15-minute mark and have a lot more going on. The game now relies on the monster and hunters meeting on several occasions, seeing who can deal the most permanent damage during the current encounter, until eventually one side pushes its advantage for the win. The hunters would like to fight as early as possible when the monster is weak, while the monster wants to avoid them and eat as much as possible to be able to evolve and grow stronger. The monster has shields which can be replenished by eating wildlife, and an HP bar that never heals, though it increases a bit when you evolve. This means if the hunters deal enough HP damage in the early stages, they could even take down a stage 3 monster later in the game, where in theory the monster is much stronger at that point. When the hunters take enough damage, they get incapacitated and lose a part of their maximum HP. When downed, a hunter can be revived by a teammate on the spot or respawn much slower through the dropship. After going down twice, when a hunter gets incapacitated again, they go directly to the dropship and cannot be revived by a teammate. Note the dropship timer increases every time a hunter gets incapacitated and when the monster evolves. Adding all that up, the timer can get as long as 2 minutes, which is a lot of time to be out of the game. The monster wins if all the hunters are dead at the same time, but because of how difficult this is early in the game, the monster should usually focus on knocking out 1 or 2 of them to reduce their maximum HP before running away to replenish shields and try to evolve. The mechanics in metagame are pretty complicated and incredibly important for players to understand in order to do well and, more importantly, enjoy the game. So here's the problem. The 2 10-minute tutorials do not teach any of those mechanics to the players. There are also a bunch of other mechanics that are relevant, like the power relay that the monster can destroy after evolving enough, leading to victory, or the time limit on the monster before the hunters win, but none of those are communicated to the player in any way. The tutorials serve mostly to teach the controls and are a character introduction for 2 out of the many characters you can play in the game, and that leads us to the next problem. Evolve has about 6 characters for each hunter class and 7 monsters, including adjustments of previous characters such as the Goliath and Meteor Goliath or Markov and Blitz Markov. These usually have similar abilities, yet the approach and playstyle differ, and that's really the problem. The wealth of characters bring out a very robust array of playstyles, which sounds great for the game as a whole, but for a beginner and even a somewhat experienced player is a total nightmare. There are so many different combinations of hunters and monsters in every game. When players aren't taught even the basics of the metagame, when you throw curveballs that mix things up, what chance do they have? From my limited experience, not a lot. I've had games where hunters simply go on following tracks and split off in 2 different directions, not even changing course when the planetary scanner clearly shows the monster is not that way, because they don't know how it works. Yes, this is a rare case, but it's just an example of players not understanding something very basic about the game, and it's really not their fault, they were just never taught. I've also been victim to 4 or 5 minute matches multiple times where a level 1 monster simply kills off the hunters because they have no idea what their abilities do and don't know how to work as a team. As the monster, it's not very difficult to beat hunters even at level 1 if they don't know what they're doing, and if the monster does, it's pretty easy to run away, eat up, and destroy them later on. These are just some of my personal experiences, but they are clearly not unique. As an example of how low character knowledge is, I wanted to play 1 week's Assault class rotation, Torvald. Another player asked me to switch to a simpler character, and when I didn't, actually left the game proclaiming that character is useless. We actually won that game as I slowly learned how that character works through trial and error. I was lucky to be up against a monster that suited that character pretty well if you knew what you were doing, which by the end of the match I sorta was. Torvald is a complex character that acts quite differently from other assaults by bombarding the monster from afar, and requires the team to acknowledge that and play around him. Clearly not easy if you have no idea how he works. So how do we fix this? First, a set of short 3 to 5 minute tutorials about the main mechanics of the game. These tutorials should be totally scripted, with the player having almost no impact on their outcome, but hopefully without them noticing too much. They should teach things like when to use the dome, how the dropship works, what kind of permanent damage can be inflicted on both sides, and other mechanics like the power relay. Other tricks involve enabling subtitles for these tutorials regardless of the setting in the option menu, just to give an extra shot that players will read them. When first loading up the game, the basic tutorial should be the first thing a new player sees. There should be an option to skip, but only after an additional message box letting the player know. Going through the tutorials will really help the enjoyment of the game. There are already character unlock rewards for completing the tutorials, which is a great idea, but they should be more clearly advertised. None of these guarantee players will listen, but they're a step in the right direction, as currently the game does very little to teach players. Each character also needs a much more robust explanation of its purpose and abilities. These should be viewable at all times, and not only when you're picking a character for a match under time constraint. In addition, a simple sandbox mode where you can test these abilities in a stress-free environment will really help, and all characters should be available for this mode regardless if you unlocked or bought them. Such a mode would also promote purchasing characters you've actually got a feel for instead of blindly hoping you'll like them. A full-blown 4 or so minute tutorial for each character would be even better, but those are solutions for the longer term. There's a lot to be desired, but Evolve's core concept is really special and creates such unique gameplay that there's a good chance it'll stick. At times when it all clicks, when the hunters work together to track and kill a monster, Evolve is an exhilarating experience you can't really get anywhere else, and that's the selling point. With the new free-to-play model, more people can try it out and hopefully manage to see that. That's it, that's all from me. Thanks for watching, and see you on the hunting grounds. Whew, that was a lot of footage. I hope it came out well. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you liked the video, consider subscribing. I do a bunch of stuff on my channel, like a full playthrough of Baldur's Gate 2, which you can access on the left, or another video of this type where I talk about Fury. Please make sure to share the video, that would really help me out. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.